Oh, that's not me. Welcome to the session. Hang on a second. There we are. And I'm going to bring in Emma, who is the IELTS expert.
Hi.
There you are. Right. Thank you for joining us. We're not going to start straight away. We're going to wait for a few more people to join us before we begin. This is Emma, who
Hello.
is IELTS expert. And she's going to be talking about tips for editing in the writing test. Now, it's a really, really sunny day out there, but unfortunately, this was the only room I could get, and it's really dark. As you can tell in Emma's room, it's very bright and sunny in England today. Now, I can see that lots of you are joining us from all over the world. We have hello from Tess, who is from the Philippines, but now on holiday in Scotland. Mary Tess. It'd be great if you could tell us where you're joining us from. Actually, Emma, where are you joining us from?
Oh, I'm in a little town just north of London in the UK. It's very sunny today, very nice. It's been raining for days and now the sun's come out, so that's all good.
Oh, that is very good. I'm joining you from Cambridge, where it's really beautiful out there. And yes, yesterday was just a deluge of rain, rain, rain. Welcome to everyone who has just joined us. And we've got people coming in from Taiwan and from Nepal. So, hello, Myanmar, Kerala, so from all over the globe. Now, if you've been following our IELTS page, you might have seen that this question was posed. So I'm just going to show it full screen for a second.
Okay.
All right. True or false, there is no point in reading through your writing as you aren't allowed to make any changes or cross out words. Now, what do you think? Most of you thought that it was false, and as promised, here's Emma with the answer.
Okay, so, well, we're going to spend today talking about editing, so therefore, clearly it's false. You are allowed to make changes and you are allowed to cross out words, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more later on. It is very important. Editing can be the difference between one score and another. Although SJ and I were talking earlier that we won't be able to talking about individual band scores and how you achieve them because they're so personal to your own work, and without seeing examples of all of your work, there's no way we can give you specific advice for that.
Okay, so I think we're about ready to start talking about it. Yes, and I'm just going to repeat what Emma just said for those of you who have only just joined us. We are talking about editing in the writing test. But one of the things that we aren't going to be able to discuss is how to get a specific band. As Emma has said before, unfortunately, this is something that's very particular to you, is really individual. And without further ado, let us begin. And I'm going to turn it over to Emma. All right.
Okay. Right, here I am. Editing tips for the writing test. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at mostly at task 2, but it's all relevant for task 1. It's relevant for academic and general training IELTS paper. So welcome to all of you who have joined us. We've got quite a lot of you viewing already. So why are we talking about editing? Well, we already said about with the true and false question that it's something that many of us don't do. We're in such a rush and we're worried that we're running out of time that we don't do it. So we need to change that because it is important and it can make a really big difference. So if you look at the marking criteria, you don't need to look at it now. We're going to put a link to it at the very end of the presentation today in the comments. So don't worry about looking now, but I'm going to go through the marking criteria and sort of explain it a little bit to you, and you'll be able to see just how important editing your work is. Okay? So we've got some slides, I think. If SJ could pop the first one up for me, thank you. Okay, so the first thing that the examiners are looking at and marking you on is something called task response. Okay, so task response is all about answering the question fully. So have you read the question, understood the question, and then fully answered it? Have you covered all the points in the question? And have you written about the issues and not just general topics? So the specific issues that they're asking in the question. You need to make sure that any supporting ideas you give are relevant. You don't want random information that's slightly to do with the question, but not really. Everything must be relevant, and you have to give a clear answer. And if we're talking about task 2, it has to be over 250 words. Okay, and if you just copy the question out, then they'll take those words off, and you might fall short of the word count. So you need to use your own words. Okay, so that's all task response. Now, it's not editing that you need for task response, it's planning. Okay, so as well as talking about editing, we really need to talk about planning too. So plan your essay before you even start. If you do a good plan, then you should get a good mark in your task response, or the best mark you can achieve in task response. So next slide, please, SJ. We should have a slide coming up now that says coherence and cohesion. Okay, perfect, there it is. So this is the second area that the examiners are marking you on. They've got 4 areas that they need to look at, and then they give you a mark in those 4 areas, and then the overall mark is given from those 4 marks. So coherence and cohesion, they're looking at how the answer is organized. So again, this one you can deal with in the planning stage. They're looking at the use of paragraphs. 1 paragraph, 1 topic. So your essay should have 4 or 5 paragraphs, really. You should have an introduction, and then 2 or 3 main body paragraphs, giving different points of view, probably. And then your conclusion, which is where you summarize and give your full opinion. Now, you need to plan these carefully so that you have a topic sentence and so that you have supporting ideas. These are all the things that the examiners are looking for in the coherence and cohesion marks. They're also looking for the use of referencing, so not repeating yourself. They're looking at the use of linkers. So you need to make sure you've got those cohesive devices learnt and you're using them properly. Use a range as well. We can't just always use and, but, because. We need to use a variety. Furthermore, however, therefore, all of these things. Be very, very careful planning. I can't tell you enough how important the planning stage is. Before you write anything, you need to analyze the question. Think about what is it actually asking? What are the different parts of the question? Make sure you're going to answer all of them. Then plan your answer. What will each paragraph be talking about? If you write down a plan, you can keep looking back to it and make sure you don't go off topic. That way, these first 2 categories, task response and coherence and cohesion, they should be fine. You shouldn't have anything to edit later on with those. You should have those under control from the planning stage. All right then, so let's move on to lexical resource. Okay, lexical resource is basically looking at your use of vocabulary, paraphrasing. Now, paraphrasing is saying the same thing in a different way. So this comes in your introduction straight away. So how are you going to talk about the question without actually using the exact words of the question? How can you talk about the topic but using in a different way? Okay, so how can you paraphrase the question? We're also looking at spelling in lexical resource. So this is where our editing comes in. Okay, if you can get your spelling right, that's great. But if you often make spelling mistakes, this is going to be really important, because how many mistakes you make can be the difference between a band 5, a band 6, or band 7. So later on, when you download, hopefully you download the marking criteria and look at it very carefully, you'll notice that in Lexical Resource, in a band 5, there are lots of spelling mistakes and the wrong words, use of the wrong words that can cause difficulty for the reader to understand what you're trying to say. Whilst if you jump to the band 7 criteria, there are only occasional spelling mistakes. Those are the words that they use in the marking criteria. Only occasional spelling mistakes and occasional wrong words. So if we think about it, if we can catch those spelling mistakes as we're writing and at the end when we edit, that can make a massive difference to the marks that you get, okay? So collocations are important. By collocations, we mean words that go together. So we might be talking about, let's think about the topic of, we're talking about sports. So we play games, we do sports, we go swimming, we do yoga, all of those, you know, when your teachers are going on at you about which verbs go with which activities, which nouns and adjectives, and how all your words, like chunks of language. This is where this becomes really important. As we said before, good spelling is very important. It can make a difference. It really can. And you need to use a range of words specifically for that topic. Now, that's a huge thing to be able to do, to have enough vocabulary to talk about all the different topics that come up in IELTS. And there are so many possibilities. So you need to be really actively learning vocabulary. To learn vocabulary, the best thing you can do is read a variety of sources. Read news, read novels, read magazine articles, read everything and anything, and try to actively make a note of vocabulary. Learning vocabulary is an active thing. You can't passively just remember it. You need to read it. You need to write it down. You need to make a note of it. You need to translate it. You need to put it together with other words to make chunks of language. You need to actively use new words that you're learning. That's how you'll fix them into your mind. And learning in chunks of language will mean that they're much easier to use in your writing because you've already got them in a chunk, okay? Make sure that your language is not too informal in your writing, okay? We don't want loads of contractions and hey guys and, you know, when you're writing in your IELTS test, I want you to think about writing for a teacher or a professor. Remember, it's an exam. Remember that, especially in the writing test, it's a more formal situation. In the academic paper, particularly, remember, you're writing as if you're writing for a professor at university. So your language needs to be that level of formality. Not really, really, really formal, but not informal. Just in the middle. If you can find lots of examples of writing, good, strong examples, band 7, band 8, band 9, then have a look at them, see what kind of language they're using, try to analyze them, and then apply that to your own writing. Okay, let's just take a moment. How's everyone doing? I'm getting out of breath. I need a drink of water, going too fast.
Well, I think we've racked up a few questions relating to what you just spoke about. But as I said, we're not going to answer questions right now. We're going to wait until we finish the session, and then we'll answer questions at the end. And for those of you who have just joined us, this is a session on editing your writing in the writing test. We've just been through task response, lexical resource, and have I missed something? Coherence.
Coherence and cohesion.
Coherence and cohesion. So the three things that I've just taken away from it is read the question very, very carefully, plan your answer, and actively use new words and get more vocabulary. So again, this is a session about editing on writing, so we're not going to tackle any other questions outside of that. So what is the next thing on our...
Okay, we've got grammatical range and accuracy coming up.
Okay, so I'm going to get out of here.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
Okay, so we're going to be looking at grammatical range and accuracy. So we'll get the next slide will come up. So in grammatical range and accuracy, the examiner will be looking at the tenses you use. Are they appropriate? Are you using a nice range of tenses? Are you using them consistently? You don't want a sentence that starts in the present tense, goes off into the past tense. You know, you've got to be using it accurately. So range and accuracy. So you've got to push yourself to use a wide range of grammar appropriately, but you also need to make sure you're accurate. It would be better to have a more simple sentence that was accurate than to push yourself to use a kind of structures that you don't yet fully understand. You can't use accurately yet, because that might end up with your writing being difficult to understand. And if your writing is difficult to understand and to follow, then you're automatically going to get a lower mark. So don't be too ambitious, but remember that you have to use a range. You have to use an appropriate range, and you have to use it accurately. They will be looking at how many mistakes you make again. So it's like the lexical resource. So the more mistakes you make, the lower band score you're going to achieve. Because by the time you're at 7, you shouldn't be making too many mistakes. It should be very comfortable for the reader to follow your ideas. Okay. Punctuation also comes into this section. People forget often about punctuation, but it is important. So are you using your commas, full stops, question marks, exclamation marks, whatever it is? Are you using them accurately? We don't want to forget a question mark at the end of a question. If you put a hypothetical question in your task 2 essay, remember, you need a question mark at the end of it. So again, band 5 in the marking criteria will say it has frequent errors. That's fine, frequent errors. But by band 7, we're on to only occasional errors. So it does matter. So here is where editing comes in. So these last 2 categories, grammatical range and accuracy, and lexical range, lexical resource, what do I call it? Yeah, lexical resource. That's where you can bump up your marks after you've finished writing. You can go back and edit. Okay, it can make the difference. It really can make a difference. So that's a very brief overview of the marking criteria. Like I said, we're going to put a link in the comments at the end so that you can download the public version of the marking criteria, which is available from IELTS.org. And you can have a look at it. And it's written in language for the examiners. So, you know, it's a little bit complicated to understand, but you can see that they mention how often, how frequently you'll see an error, how easy it is to understand the writing, how easy it is to understand the point that the examiner is looking for. Okay, so do take some time to look at that marking criteria, because the more you understand of what the examiner is looking for, the more you can give them what they're looking for. Okay, so let's go on to our next question. Yes. So there should be another slide coming that says, how do I make sure my writing is as good as possible? Well, it's all about making the most of the English that you have. So your level of English, you can't, if your level of English is only intermediate level, then you're not going to get an advanced level score. But you need to make the most of the English you've got, get the best band score that you can achieve. So stay calm, think clearly. Don't panic in the exam. Okay, remember, it is a very short amount of time. I understand that. But planning is going to make such a big difference to you. So I'm sure if you were honest, a lot of you would, if I said, do you plan your essays? You would say, I think about it, but I don't write down a plan. I don't really thoroughly plan every paragraph. Now you need to really do that. I promise it will make such a difference. Start doing it when you're practicing. Start doing it when you're even just planning and not writing the essays will help you get into that, get into the habit of brainstorming your ideas, reading a question, brainstorming your ideas, planning your answer. And even if you don't write the answer, that exercise of reading questions, analysing them, understanding them, brainstorming your ideas, so thinking about all the possible things you could write about, then picking out what you're going to use from that ideas generating session, and then putting them into a plan. So in my introduction, I'll say this. In my first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph, conclusion, what will each one say? You could even write the topic sentence for each one. Because remember, one paragraph, one idea. We can't chop and change. Otherwise it gets very messy and your coherence and cohesion goes all over the place. Okay. Then editing, making sure spelling is correct, words are correct, word order is correct, that you haven't made any silly mistakes. But we'll look at a list of common mistakes in a moment. So let's have the next slide now, please. So, making corrections. So here we can see that a piece of advice I often give my students, and not all teachers say this, but I personally ask my students to do this, is to write on every other line so that you have space to make corrections. If you think about a piece of your handwriting, and when you're writing quickly, it's probably a bit messy. We all, none of us are perfect. And if you've got it all, very tightly bunched up, and then when you come back to edit or make corrections, it's very difficult to squeeze your ideas in. Say you want to cross out one word and write the new word, the better fit word. How can you do that clearly if you don't leave space? So if you can remember to leave a line, write, then leave a line, then write, then leave a line, then write, then leave a line. That means when you do want to make a change, you can make a change very clearly. It's not stressful for you, and it's not stressful for the examiner to try to understand what you've done. Okay, so it is fine to cross out a whole sentence if you want to. That's fine. But as you can see in the second point, don't use an eraser. Okay, if you're writing and you rubbing out very quickly, sometimes you only rub out the marks a little bit, and so there's a very faint word there. The examiner doesn't want to be trying to second guess, is that a cancelled word, or is that word just very faint? So I would suggest that you simply put a line through your mistake, okay, and then write neatly above it your correction. Or if you're just cancelling a word, just put a line through it and then continue. Okay, it's not going to be a problem. Right, so can we have the next slide maybe? Right, what should I look for? This is a question that I get asked a lot from students. So they say, well, it's all well and good, Emma, that you say we have to edit our work, but we're not teachers, we're not examiners, we don't know what to look for. And so the answer to that is that you have to look for the mistakes that you make. Okay, so in order to know what mistakes you make, you can do a few things. You need to analyse your own writing. You need to look at your own writing and try and work out where the mistakes are. And you'll notice that you are making similar mistakes. You either struggle with spelling, or you struggle with word order, or you get confused with the tense that you're using. You forget auxiliary verbs. There's often something that you have a little, like that's your main problem. To find out what you're doing wrong is probably the best way to find out is to get feedback from a coach or a teacher. So if you are studying in an IELTS class, go back through the essays and the writing that your teachers or your coaches have marked and look, is there any Are there any regularly occurring mistakes that you're making? Is it always vocab? Is it always word order? Is it always grammatical errors? You know, start to make a list of the things that you often make a mistake on, or ask your coach or your teacher, right, look, okay, here are some pieces of work. Could you please tell me where I often make the same mistake so that you can work on it? So there are areas, however, that many people make mistakes with. And I'm going to give you a checklist in a minute. But before I do that, it is important to get feedback on your writing from a professional if you can, because that will mean you can learn from your mistakes. So all of this practicing, all of this editing, planning, every time you do it, you're going to get a bit better. And every time you do it, you're going to make a few less mistakes because you're focused on the mistakes you make. So you'll be concentrating. Okay, so right, let's have a look at what commonly is a problem for people. So I'm not sure that I can actually see the bottom of this slide. I think we'll work on that. So look, we've got plurals. Is it a singular? Is it a plural? It's as simple as that. Okay, go through. If you often make a mistake, you put S's on the end of words that don't need them, then you need to be checking for that when you're editing your work. Punctuation. Have you got full stops, commas, semicolons, whatever it is that you need? Have you got them there? Have you remembered them? Articles. Articles, the, an, a, or a zero article. This is a huge problem for people. They use them too much, they leave them out. It's one of those areas that even at advanced levels, it's one of the last things that people get. So I think when we're learning English, we learn about articles at the beginning. So when you're in an elementary class or when you're first learning the language, you learn a chair, an elephant, an orange, and then you learn some simple rules about articles. Then we don't really focus on them again until you become an advanced level student, and then you realize that there are lots of different times and places that we use articles. I strongly advise that you go away and revisit this area of grammar. It's a problem for people from every country in the world. It seems to cause a problem for all sorts of people. Some use them too much, some don't use them at all. Some have them in their own language, some don't have them in their own language. Anyway, it's consistently a problem. So I urge you to go away and have a look at those. Again, subject-verb agreement, also a problem for people. So what do we mean by subject-verb agreement? Well, it's as simple as he plays football, third person S. Okay, is your subject plural, singular? The more complex your sentences become, the harder that can be sometimes to notice, but you really need to make sure you're getting that right, because it is quite a simple mistake. So if you get it wrong, it's a real shame. Tense and spelling, and I don't think there was anything on the bottom there. I don't know, I think I've got a message from SJ. Okay.
The message is that the last one is repetition.
So we're here on Facebook today talking about editing your writing in the IELTS exam, specifically at task 2, but it's equally important for task 2. SJ?
The last one on that editing checklist was repetition.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought. So yes, check for that you're not repeating yourself. You're not using the same vocabulary over and over again. Okay, you need lots of synonyms. Synonyms, words that mean the same. So, and referencing is also important. Okay. All right then. So, should we have the next one?
Yep.
How's everyone doing?
I think everyone's doing just fine. Like I said, quite a few of comments and questions coming in. But hang on a second. Here's your next slide.
Okay. When should I edit my work? Well, the general advice is that you leave 3 to 4 minutes at the end to look back over your work. I can hear you all now going, but I don't have time. When I can't even finish the writing, I don't have time to edit. But if you can speed up, you really will benefit from this. But you also, don't forget, you could edit after each paragraph. So you write your introduction and you quickly read back through it, especially if you know what you're looking for. If you've practiced this and you've established your own personal editing checklist that you've memorized. So I always make mistakes with subject-verb agreement. So you go back and you reread the paragraph before you move on, looking specifically for the mistakes that you often make. Okay, that's probably a very quick way to get it done. It also means that you're less likely to go off topic if you reread your paragraphs as you write them. Now, that's not the general advice that most teachers give, but I have found that it works quite well for some people. It is a case of practicing, trying out different approaches and working out what is the best approach for you. Okay. At the end, you're going to look back at your writing with 3 or 5 minutes to go. You don't have time to make massive changes. At this point, you are simply looking for spelling mistakes, wrong words, quick change of grammar, quick subject-verb agreement. You're not going to be able to rewrite a whole paragraph or change your answer that much. Okay, so you need to plan to avoid that being a problem. So you plan at the beginning, then you've got to write very quickly, and then you go back and you just check for those silly mistakes that you know you often make. Right. Okay. So let's have a look at a little chunk of a real script. This was a part of a real answer that you can find on the IELTS.org website. We'll put links later. So have a little look at that. I'm going to stop talking and I want you to just look and see if you can edit correct, if you can see anything that you could change, okay? Okay, let's see what comments you're making. Okay. Marites is telling us that spelling for outweighing disadvantages. Thailand. Okay, we've got some really good comments here. Okay, so what we can see in this piece of writing is that there are spelling mistakes. There are plural mistakes. We've got some wrong words. But there are some things that we could rectify very quickly with a quick edit. Okay. So I think SJ might have a smaller chunk with some corrections in it. There we go. So have a look at that. Now, these corrections don't make it perfect. It's not suddenly going to be a band score 9, but they have improved it. And it doesn't take long to do. And you can see, so in my opinion, the advantages, do you see the small arrow? And I've put the word the above. This is a standard way of showing where the extra word should go. I've simply drawn a line through outweigh and written the correct spelling above, again with Thailand. I've changed the words from live from tourism to rely on tourism. Okay. We've got an extra article that's crossed out. We've got salesmen. That was the wrong plural. But I've added some commas, full stop, so punctuation is covered there. Now, like I say, this was a very quick edit. It doesn't make it perfect, but it has improved it. Did you agree with the corrections that I've made? I may have even missed something because I did it very quickly. Okay, so I wanted you to see a small example of how it would look. Now, I was able to write quite neatly within the lines on here, but I had blown it up into a very large piece of paper in order to do that. So originally this was on a much smaller piece of paper. If this person had left a line, it would have been much easier for them to write their corrections neatly, because as it stands, they look fine, but like I say, that's because I blew it up to a very large size in order to write on it clearly. Okay, so I hope that illustrates how you can neatly make changes, but also the importance of leaving a line. If you can do that, that will really help. Okay, so I think we're on to our final slide now. Okay, so what can I do next? So it's all well and good me sitting here telling you all about things, and I see there were quite a few comments of people asking about what books can they buy, that kind of thing. There's all sorts of IELTS preparation material out there. Here, we're going to put some links into the comments. So there's a 4 skills online tutorial on IELTS.org, which is the Cambridge IELTS website. That you should be able to find some examples, some past papers, and you can work your way through. Okay, step by step. You'll also see comments from examiners on essays, a couple of essays, or maybe one, can't remember. And the band descriptors. So that link there is for the marking criteria, so that you can look at what a band score 1 to a band score 9 in each of those 4 criteria for writing looks like. And so you can take that away and digest it. Okay, so that's it from me. SJ, are you still there?
Hi, I am still here, and I've collated
I've lost everyone. Ah, there she is.
I have some questions for you to answer.
Okay, I'll try my best.
Do you want to take a sip of water?
Yeah.
So we're now in the question and answer section of the session. If you joined the session late, don't worry. It's going to be available on our Facebook page, and you can watch it anytime you want. You know, you can watch it as often as you like and whenever you want. We're not going to take it down. So just come back to our page. We'll make sure that it's there for you to review it whenever you want. I've just posted the 2 links that Emma was talking about for the band descriptors, as well as the online tutorial for the 4 skills. So we'll make sure they're up on the page as well. So now there are more questions coming in right now.
Okay.
So you can, I'm going to put this up now, which is comment with your questions now. All right. Okay. Okay, one of the questions that you'd actually answered about editing using, instead of erasing, you can cross out and insert a new word, so you did cover that already. The very interesting question that was asked a couple of times was, should we use third person or can we use first person? Somebody had actually said that they had been told that they should never use first person in task 2. I
think that's kind of standard advice, actually, from teachers, because in a formal academic essay in the United Kingdom, if you're writing at university, for example, you wouldn't use first person until the conclusion. So you make your argument and then you give your opinion at the end. So a lot of teachers would give that advice, and to be honest, I would as well, because it helps you to get the level of formality right. If you're writing in the first person, it's very easy to slip into a style that's too informal for the task. So I think that's not bad advice, actually.
So you'll end up using a lot of contractions like I'll do this. Yeah. It's quite a personal essay rather than
So when we have an advantages and disadvantages and give your opinion, the expectation is that you explain the situation, that you give the advantages, that you give the disadvantages, you show that you've considered and weighed up the argument, and then in the conclusion, that's where you give your opinion after you've shown that you've understood both sides. So I guess that's what the advice was probably for.
That seems like quite sensible advice. Speaking of opinions, someone also asked, do you always have to look at both sides of an argument, or, because they feel that sometimes it's hard to argue both sides, particularly if you feel quite strongly about one side of an argument. Do you always have to argue both sides?
If it asks for both sides of the argument, then yeah, really, you kind of do. You can make the one side of your argument stronger, because obviously you can say that, as far as you're concerned, the one side outweighs the other. But to argue just one side would be a challenge to do it well enough and still get your task achievement. Mm-hmm. I would probably try to come up with a more balanced argument for the IELTS exam, because remember, it's not actually a test of your opinion, and it's not actually a test of your ideas. It's a test of your English and your ability to answer a question in English. So, you could write an answer that is contrary to your own personal opinion and nobody would ever know. Like the advice I've given about the speaking test before, you don't have to tell the truth. Nobody is ever going to phone your mum or dad and check, or your partner, is that what they really think? So it's more showing your vocabulary, showing your ability to balance an argument, showing your ability to use these kinds of phrases like on the other hand, whilst, however, that's what they're looking for.
Which brings us very neatly to the next question. Do we have to use authentic evidence, authentic examples? For example, let's just say that you're building an argument and you want to evidence a survey, but then it was a survey that never happened. You just made up the survey.
That's all right. No, the examiner's marking all day long different essays. They're not going to go and check, did that survey really happen in Toronto in 1976? I don't know. It's because they're actually, what you're doing there is you're showing that you can correctly reference a survey. So we're not at university where or you're not doing a course in whatever the topic is, where actually finding the correct survey, being able to understand it properly, and that is what's being tested. Here, what's being tested is your use of English and your ability to communicate a certain idea and to answer a question. So yes, go for it. It does take longer to make things up, just be warned. It does take longer to create a whole, mythical world of evidence.
But the way of looking at it is that of a particular survey, you just can't remember the details of it.
So of course,
the details of it.
Yes.
Yes, you do remember the survey that occurred, that was quoted somewhere or the other, but you just can't remember when exactly or what.
Or that's fine. That's not a problem at all. So long as your English is good and varied and appropriate, then that's fine.
Okay, so, and somebody did ask, do I need to tell the truth during the speaking test? And I think you referenced that before, and that's exactly the same thing. No, you don't have to.
No, you need to show your English.
Okay, so there are a couple of very specific things like acronyms. Now, how do we properly use acronyms within an essay? Do you mention?
I think the first time you use it, I know I might be wrong on this, so we may have to follow up. But my understanding is that in an academic essay, the first time that you use an acronym, you would explain, you would give the full name and then the acronym afterwards in brackets, and then for the rest of the essay you'd be able to use the acronym because you've explained its meaning.
Yes. Yeah, that was my understanding as well, but we'll probably follow up that and confirm that. The other one was, speaking of academic, so a question is, what is the difference between writing, academic writing, and a journalistic style of writing? That's a tricky question.
Very tricky question. Well, writing a journalistic style of writing, I guess you mean by like magazine articles or news articles, then you are there's probably more emphasis on capturing people's attention, use of hypothetical questions at the beginning, headlines. You could use speech, direct speech, indirect speech, whereas in academic writing it's much more.
I'm really sorry. There's somebody wheeling something very squeaky outside my door. It's just really loud.
They're going very slowly past.
They're going very slowly past. It's a very long corridor. Let's wait a couple of seconds.
I think, so journalistic writing is more sensational, maybe. Could be more informal, uses more hyperbole, that kind of thing. Whereas academic writing is quite conservative and quite sedate, and we don't need to use a lot of I don't know, you wouldn't put speech, you wouldn't have quotes particularly in a writing task for the IELTS academic paper, for example.
Okay. But, yeah. It really depends on your journalistic standard.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes. Are you writing for a scientific journal, or are you writing for the Sun or HuffPost or the Onion, or
Yes. It really depends. Okay. Can we use idioms in writing?
Yes, of course you can. One thing to be wary of, though, is that idioms are incredibly difficult to use correctly. And the advice I normally give to my students is, whilst they love learning idioms, and everybody loves a good idiom, I advise people to learn them to be able to understand and to maybe use in speaking, but to avoid using too many in writing, because one, they're often used wrongly, and grammatically they can be quite hard to insert, and two, it can become a bit cliche. It's a bit overused. So unless you're very, very confident that you have got the exact right situation for that idiom and you're very comfortable using it, I would advise against it. I would learn idioms just for the fun of it and for speaking with friends and that kind of thing, but using them in an exam only if you're very sure you're doing it correctly.
Okay.
Would be my advice.
In the same vein, should we avoid using phrasal verbs?
No, I don't think phrasal verbs are fine. Phrasal verbs are everywhere in English, so you can't really avoid using them. I think some teachers may advise against it, but again, if you know your vocabulary, you know your phrasal verbs, then yeah, go for it. I wouldn't avoid them like I would avoid idioms.
One of the things that you said quite early on and quite consistently all the way through was actually you have to be actively learning new words because you need to demonstrate a wide range and have particularly things like synonyms, because you don't really want to avoid repetition to show breadth of vocabulary.
Yeah.
So we were asked a couple of times, how can we learn new words, and what's the best way of acquiring new words and then putting those into practice so that they stick? Your advice on that?
Lots and lots of time, lots of effort, and lots of energy putting into it. It's not there's no quick answer. Memorizing a list of words means that you've memorized a list of words, but you can't necessarily use them. So it's noticing new words, it's actively going out of your way and going, right, I want to learn about this topic. I want to learn about plastics in the ocean, for example. So I'm going to actively go out. I'm going to find documentaries. I'm going to find news articles. I'm going to find journal articles. And I'm going to watch them, read them. Sorry, that's my phone. Watch them, read them with my vocabulary notebook. And I'm going to stop and I'm going to look things up in the dictionary. I'm going to make a note of new words. I'm going to try and actively notice new things in articles, in books. And then I'm going to make a note of the examples that I find. And then I'm going to start trying to insert them into the work that I'm producing. And it's very slow. To do it well is slow and it takes a lot of effort, but that effort is rewarded by you knowing and understanding new vocabulary. But I would take a topic and say, right, I want to improve my vocabulary in this topic, and then just go out and find documentaries, find newspaper articles, find if you look in your textbooks, or if you've got a vocabulary book, they're often they're organized by topic. So you work your way through that and then supplement it with extra reading, that kind of thing.
That's excellent advice, and certainly applicable to almost any language that you're learning. I can say that I'm going to address some of the questions that have come in the last few minutes. We've had a couple of very band specific questions. Yes, so doing very well in 3 modules and not doing very well in something else. I don't think we are able to really.
No, unfortunately, we would need to speak to the individuals. You'd need to see examples of the individual's work to be able to give really useful feedback. This is where unfortunately it's hard to prepare for IELTS completely alone. There's a lot out there. There are lots of resources online. You can watch lives like this, but you can't beat good feedback from a good teacher.
Yeah. How important is it to add an outline sentence in your essay introduction?
Well, your introduction should probably have a thesis statement in it. So to say that the essay is going to look at the advantages and disadvantages, or this essay will look at how blah blah blah. It's paraphrasing the question. The introduction is basically paraphrasing the question to show that you've understood it, and for yourself as well. If you can paraphrase it correctly, that means you've understood it. So our introduction is there to introduce the topic. Don't make it a really long one. It's not a massively long academic dissertation or anything. It's a short thing. You want to save your words for the body. So just a small sort of topic sentence there. I'm not sure how helpful that was, but
okay. There is one question that came up a little bit earlier when we were talking about crossing out things and inserting things in so your advice was, when you're writing your answer out, is to write one line, leave a line, and then carry on writing.
Yeah.
You have space to make corrections.
Yeah.
Now, somebody raised the issue that you're only given pencils in the exam. And if you were, I suppose, a blunt pencil, if you crossing things out quite a lot, it gets all smudgy and messy. Can you actually bring your own pens in?
Do you know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, because I'm surprised to hear that it's only pencil, because I would have imagined it was only pens.
Okay.
So that's something to look at and to put the answer later, perhaps. Maybe double check that.
All right.
And it might be a centre specific.
Yeah, it might be a centre specific thing.
If they only give you pencils, they ought to give you more than one pencil, so that when it gets blunt, you can have a sharp one, because that is it is horrible working with a blunt pencil.
Okay, that's definitely something we'll follow up, and we'll respond to you on the wall.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between the general and academic task 2 writing styles?
The academic paper is just slightly more formal. Like the general paper is a little less formal, but task 2 is still an essay, so you still follow essay style, really.
Okay, we only have about 6 minutes, so we'll try and get through as many of these questions. Will you be penalized if you exceed the word limit?
No, if you exceed it too far. I mean, there's some wiggle room. I wouldn't write more than 300 words.
Okay.
If you write too little, then your task achievement, I would try to stick as closely to 250 words as you can. Make sure that when you're practicing, you get a feel for how much 250 words of your writing looks like. And then you don't have to count all of the words in the test. But if you know that writing on every line, it's one side of A4, writing on every other line, it's two sides, or it's a side and a half, or it's 3/4 of a side, you'll get a feel for your own handwriting how much about 250 words is.
Mm-hmm. So I think the question was quite specific. If you exceed it by 20 to 30 words, I mean,
You're probably fine.
Be fine.
You shouldn't worry too much about that.
Hold on. It's a band question, academic style. We talked about that already. Oh, well, that's an interesting one. Should we memorize some paragraphs for the writing task?
No.
Okay. What's the best way to study for the writing exam? That is a very, very big question, and I'm not sure we would have time to answer them.
I can see the comments actually, and there's one from Rajesh saying, in your example earlier, you used an inverted arrow, but can you use a that way round arrow to add a new word or correct word? Yes, you can. You can do that way, or you can do that way. But that just, all it does is the point shows you where the word should go. Okay? Does that make sense? I'm sure it makes sense to Rajesh.
It says here you are penalized for underlength from my length group. Yes. Yeah. Oh, so that the whole pens and pencils thing seems to be a center thing. But again, we've got a few comments here that some centers are in Cyprus only pencils.
That's something to double check then, isn't it?
We will definitely follow up on that one. Can long sentences affect my score?
If they're good, they're fine. If they're not good, then they'll lower your score. And if they're good, they'll higher. Your sentence needs to be accurate.
Yes.
Regardless of what length it is.
Okay. I think we have 3 minutes to go. And there's not really much else that we can answer in a very, very short space of time. There have been some questions about resources. Have you got any suggestions for books on writing tasks or something like that? Where to find good model essays?
I think that's something that we might need to have a look at, what's available from Cambridge and post later on the wall. Okay. Off the top of my head, I can't make any suggestions right now. If we go over 300 words, is it taken negatively? Yes.
Okay, one last thing. This is a really important question, and I'm sure it does come up to. And now, Marites Vasquez asked, "Are these editing guides applicable to all test centers?" And I think it's quite important for us to say that the exam is the same. That is correct, isn't it, Emma?
The exam is the same wherever you take it.
Wherever you take it.
And the examiners will have followed the same training wherever they're working. So, these are very standard editing things, to cross out a word and to write a new one.
Yes.
Is very standard. They can't, from one centre, say you can cross out words and replace them, and another centre say you can't. Your teachers may give you different advice. This is only my advice.
Yes. But this is universal advice. Yes, it's quite. Although it may seem that some centres are doing things differently, for example, the pens and pencils thing, when it comes to the actual exam itself, it is the same at every center you go
Yes.
to. Oh, it's marked. They all get given the same training, and they should all be marking exactly in the same way.
Exactly the same way. And if you want to, if I were you taking the exam anytime soon, I would probably call my test center, ask them what resource, is it pen, is it pencil, what will you be given on the day, so that you can practice, because it does feel different writing with a pen, writing with a pencil. All of these things do make a difference to you on the day. There's a very intense day, and the best way to prepare is to know exactly what to expect. So ask questions of the test center, find out exactly what to expect, find out exactly what you're going to be given, and then you can prepare yourself at home in as near like test conditions as possible, with getting used to writing at speed and editing at speed.
That is certainly something that it's worth us repeating, I think. Things to do to prepare for test day. So I'm going to ask this to everybody out there as well. Is this something you'd like us to cover in a live session? What are the things that you can do to prepare yourself for actual test day? Something like what you just said, which is ring the test center, find out, what are the conditions that are going to be there. I mean, that's quite an important part of preparing for an exam or any kind of test. So write in your comments if you think that is something that we should cover in the future. And we would definitely look into doing maybe something around that. So we've run out of time now. For those of you who we literally have run out of time, but can you see this one last question that's just come in? We'll answer one last question.
My body of the task sheet. That's for Cynthia. So Cynthia is asking about the main body paragraphs in advantages and disadvantages. All of the options that you have put forward are fine. None are better than the others. It would just depend on your own your preference. And also you could do one paragraph with advantages and one paragraph with disadvantages. Okay, so you don't have to. So when we say one paragraph, one topic, we don't mean it doesn't necessarily have to be one disadvantage in a paragraph. It could be the topic of that paragraph is the disadvantages of the situation, and the topic of the other main body paragraph are the advantages of the situation. Okay, does that help you, Cynthia?
Okay. All right, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up now. We'll try and get to messages that I've just come in while we're wrapping up, and we'll take into consideration all the suggestions that you guys have made. But thank you very much for joining us. We hope the session has been really, really helpful. It's been great. Emma, you've been amazing as always.
Thank you.
Great session, and I'm looking forward to doing the next one.
Yes.
All right then. Thanks.
Bye. See you soon. Bye.